Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. Very news-filled show.
Yes, we have a jam-packed Friday show. Start your weekend off right. So you'll recall earlier in the week we spoke to these filmmakers of this very controversial environmentalist film called Planet of the Humans, including Michael Moore. We have a response to that from Josh Fox, who is the filmmaker behind Gasland, who's been leading the charge against that film. So we're going to talk to him. We have David Sirota on. He's got some new reporting about Amazon that we want to get him to talk about. We also have Kelly Sadler. She is with a Trump super PAC. They've got a new ad that they're giving to us exclusively, so we're breaking that here. But let's start with the really big news of the day, which is after weeks, over a month of silence, Joe Biden finally got questioned about Tara Reade's allegations in an interview this morning with Mika Brzezinski.
Yeah, he did. And before that, 30 minutes before his interview, he put out a very long statement, and it's basically exactly as I described. He says, this did not happen. It never happened. The prelude to this was he talked about his career in the United States Senate, about how he passed the Violence Against Women's Act. He says that responsible news organizations have vetted Tara Reade's claims. He calls her out basically personally, saying that she's changed her story on multiple occasions. He says nobody in the United States Senate, in his Senate office, who's been contacted by the New York Times and others, was able to corroborate his story. Then he went on with MSNBC on Morning Joe. He was exclusively questioned by Mika Brzezinski. We should say that before all of this, Mika Brzezinski was actually a doubter and a critic of Kavanaugh coverage from the media's perspective. However, she has a long personal history of relationship with Joe Biden. There was an expecting of a softball interview. That's not exactly what materialized. We have some criticisms, but let's take a listen to some of what we have from earlier this morning. Let's take a look.
And please, to our viewers, please excuse the graphic nature of this, but I want to make sure that there is no question as to what we're talking about. She says in 1993, Mr. Vice President, that you pinned her against the wall and reached under her clothing and penetrated her with your fingers. Would you please go on the record with the American people? Did you sexually assault Tara Reade?
No, it is not true. I'm saying unequivocally, it never happened. And it didn't. It never happened.
An unequivocal denial there, Krystal, that he gave.
Yeah. And so the interview was interesting because in that statement that Biden released, he fixated on the National Archives, right? We've been talking here, and Rich McHugh, who of course has been a great journalist on this case, about the fact Tara says she filed a sexual harassment claim. Now, that wouldn't include the sexual assault piece of this, but that she filed a complaint with a Senate personnel office at the time. No one has been able to locate that. And now there seems to be a dispute about whether that would be held at the University of Delaware. That is what Tara believes based on the research that she's done. The Biden camp and Joe himself is saying, no, that would definitely be held in the National Archives. And we call on them to release any relevant records. So in his statement, he fixates on this one piece of potential evidence, almost like setting this up so that the truth or falseness of this claim could be determined by this one piece of evidence and whether or not it exists. So in the interview, a large portion of that interview fixated on, and Mika, I want to give her credit, she's very persistent on this point, on, okay, well, you say it's in the National Archives, there's a dispute here, why not just open them all up? Why not tell the University of Delaware, assign a team, get someone to go through those records and find anything that has Tara Reade's name so that we can get to the bottom of this. And he completely stonewalled on that point, would not give an inch on that point.
He would not give an inch. And beyond that, I think the most damning, the problem with Mika's line of questioning is, look, she appeared tough, even though longtime friends, she said a lot of nice things about him. She consistently just focused on this records question. So they're setting it up, and this is what I said, I'll talk about this on my radar as well, which is that this is a great conceit of a standard to just say, he has to answer the question. Okay, so he's answered. He said it didn't happen.
Right.
Is that enough?
Right.
Was that enough for Judge Kavanaugh? No, it wasn't enough for Judge Kavanaugh. The most damning part, and she briefly touched on this, she said, In 2018, when Christine Blasey Ford came forward, you said the essence of every woman's claim should be believed. Why are you changing your standard? He goes, well, we have to evaluate that on the facts. And this is the worst part. Mika never brought up the corroboration that Rich McHugh and Ryan Grimm have both reported. Number one, the Larry King phone call of her mother in 1993, I believe, or whenever it was afterwards.
Right.
And then the second one was her speaking to a neighbor and to a work associate, both in the 1990s, about an alleged incident with the United States senator. So both of those things are far more than Dr. Ford ever brought to the public fore, and yet that was enough for Joe Biden then. Now it's not enough. The standard has absolutely changed. He was not pressed on that, and I mean, at this point, I don't think he will be again. I think the press is just going to sweep it under the rug.
You think they'll say this has been dealt with, we're done here? I mean, because that is the thing. And look, I don't want to be too hard on it, but this is like a very hard thing to do, right?
Yeah.
And she was persistent on 3 points, basically. Did it happen? And do you remember Tara Reade at all? And actually, let's take a listen to his response to whether he remembers her at all.
Do you remember her? Do you remember any types of complaints that she might have made?
I don't remember any type of complaint she may have made. It was 27 years ago, and I don't remember, nor does anyone else that I'm aware of. And the fact is that I don't remember. I don't remember any complaint ever having been made.
On that point of like the allegations and do you remember anything? Does anyone remember anything? And he did a lot of like sort of word parsing of, I don't know anyone who knows of being aware, that sort of stuff. So there was that piece. She was very persistent on the Christine Blasey Ford, and here's what you said then. How does that square with what you're saying now? And she was very persistent on the records piece. The part that was completely absent is if you listen to that interview, you would think that Tara has nothing backing her up.
Exactly.
That she has no...
That it all rests on the record.
That
That's
it all...
just not the case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That it all hinges on that one complaint, which, by the way, they also don't make clear in the interview, is just about harassment, according to Tara, not about the assault. So we should be clear about that as well. But there's no mention of the fact, you guys know the list, that her brother confirmed, her friend confirmed. She said she told her mom, who called into Larry King Live. That tape emerges. Then 2 additional corroborating witnesses come forward. A neighbor that spoke with Rich McHugh. He said, look, I know this happened because Tara told me about it about 2 years after it had occurred. And a coworker who didn't corroborate the sexual assault part, but confirmed that Tara talked to her about facing harassment at her workplace in D.C., and she had been reassured that that would not reoccur in this office. There was also an intern that the New York Times spoke with who confirmed the piece of the story that Tara says she was reassigned.
Right,
she had been managing the intern. She was suddenly reassigned after she complained about sexual harassment. This intern says she does recall Tara being reassigned suddenly, and she doesn't know why. So that's, to me, the biggest sort of missed opportunity here is, again, if you're a viewer who hasn't really tuned into the story, which a lot of people haven't because the media hasn't really focused on it, you would not know that Tara has all this weight of evidence on her side. And that's why the Kavanaugh standard is so problematic for Biden and everybody else who's taking his side, because Christine Blasey Ford didn't have nearly that amount of corroboration. And most women who come forward won't have that amount of corroboration.
And that's actually what bothers me. And this is where I don't know whether to put on my conspiratorial hat or not, which is, look, this is likely the only long length of time he will ever answer questions about this allegation. I'm reasonably certain of that. This is also, frankly, the only real hearing on this that MSNBC viewers are likely to ever get. That lightning questioning, and then later it will be covered in their primetime shows, and they'll play clips from it. And if you think about the totality of that, a large segment of MSNBC viewers and Democratic voters will never hear about Rich McHugh's corroborating reporting. Will never hear about the Larry King phone call. Remember, these people exist. Everybody loves to talk about this vis-a-vis Fox, right? Everyone's like, oh, well, on Fox News, they're living in this world. Well, what about the MSNBC bubble? Has the corroboration been told to Biden's face, and has he had to respond? And again, Trump has had to do this for every single one of his sexual assault allegations. Justice Kavanaugh had to do the very same thing, literally line by line on all these other things. How come Joe Biden does not have to answer for that Larry King phone call and others, and why he believed Dr. Ford then and doesn't believe Tara Reade? He says the facts then were on Dr. Ford's side,
right,
and the facts are not here. Well, that's the thing. If these MSNBC viewers only believe that the facts are the records, look, my friend Joe Simonson, he called the Senate historian. He said it's almost impossible that these things are still around.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of records.
Well,
it's the archives.
And that's the thing is, I don't think you have to be conspiratorial to acknowledge that. And again, I don't want to be too hard on Mika here, because I think she was persistent in certain specific instances, but she also very much accepted the framing that the Biden team wanted. Yeah. They put out in their statement that they released this morning, let's look at the archives. There's one piece, that's what they literally say in the statement they released. There is one piece of this that can be confirmed.
Right.
So let's get to the bottom of that through the archives. And so the fact that Mika grabs their framing, that's what they want to focus on. And you have to imagine there's a reason why they want to focus on that one piece. So she adopts that framing and builds it. It's now been built up. So basically, whether or not that particular claim ever emerges is going to be determinative of who is telling the truth and who is not here. That's the standard that the Biden camp once set. That is not the standard that Tara Reade once set.
No, and that's not the standard that the media and Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Kirsten Gillibrand and everybody accepted whenever it came to Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. So again, I ask, what is different? And the only reasonable answer is the letter next to the name of the accused.
So I do want to say, though, even within, obviously the sort of gaps, the fact that corroborating evidence wasn't brought up, Mika was persistent in pushing on, okay, so you say, let's open up the National Archives. Like, just also open up the University of Delaware. Right. There's a dispute here. Why not just clear it up? She pressed him on that multiple times to the point that he just sort of gave up. Let's take a listen to that moment.
Ask the archives to identify any record of the complaint she alleges she filed. If there was any such complaint, the record will be there. Are you preparing us for a complaint that might be revealed in some way? Are you confident there is nothing?
I'm confident there's nothing. No one ever brought it to the attention of me 27 years ago. This is any assertion at all. No one that I'm aware of in my campaign at, my Senate office at the time is aware of any such request and or any such complaint. And so I'm not worried about it at all. If there is a complaint, that's where it would be. That's where it would be filed. And if it's there, put it out, but I've never seen it. No one has that I'm aware of.
So literally sort of
literal silence.
Silent. I mean, and you can see she pressed him on this point, and he doesn't have a good answer.
He doesn't even have a good answer.
There's no good justification.
Yeah, there is no good. The real justification is he doesn't want anybody to see what's in his private records and see what he wrote about things over the last, things in the 1980s and 1990s whenever he was dealing with NAFTA, TPP, China, and all that.
And look, I think it would be challenging to go through all of those records, because what Mika is saying is, look, we're not saying you have to release everything. Just have, we'll designate like an independent team to go through and find anything that has Tara's name. That could be a challenging and onerous task. But what's the problem? Why not just say yes? Just say, sure, let's do it. Let's figure out how to do it if you're not afraid of what could come out of that. Because again, she's not calling for let's just open up the whole thing. She's saying let's go through and find Tara's name and see if it's there, and then people can be satisfied that you've been fully transparent. And that's when he basically freezes. Doesn't really have a response to that one.
Well, we're going to be talking a lot about more of this in the show. Like we said, we have a lot more for you. We're going to tell you what's on our radars. That's next.